Today's 15 Minutes of Fact could be called 15 Minutes of Fire, which is about as hot a topic as we can find today beyond stand your ground, and that is the subject of stop and frisk. I personally consider these legally sanctioned actions to be pure and simple illegal and immoral bookends to each other, insofar as they apply to members of the Black and Latino communities. Stop and frisk, designed to search out weapons carried by such folk, and stand your ground protects gun owners who shoot down people from this very same community. So today we're going to spend a few minutes of precious phone time with Leslie Kagan, an NYC activist who is helping to organize an upcoming march to take place on Sunday, June 17th at 3 o'clock. We'll start at 110th Street between Central Park West and 5th Avenue. Details of the march can be found at www.silentmarchnyc.org. Now, I say precious phone time with Leslie because every minute she has available seems to be dedicated to the fight for human and civil rights and dignity. For those of you who do not know of her and her hard work, head to Google and Leslie Kagan, LeslieChan, for a full understanding. What I can tell you, by way of introduction, is that she's an American activist, writer, and socialist organizer involved with the peace and justice movements. She is the former national coordinator of United for Peace and Justice and the former chair of Pacifica Radio. It would be hard for you to name any protest movement that she hasn't participated in, whether it be anti-war, anti-nuke, LGBT, feminist, and back in the day, the Black Panthers. So welcome to the show today, Leslie.
Hi.
Well, let's get to the most important item for this call, Leslie, and that's the subject of stop and frisk. Please give us your role in this, what the parade is all about, and what the listener needs to know regarding this subject.
Sure. This Sunday, June 17th, which also happens to be Father's Day, literally tens of thousands of people from every corner of New York City are going to be marching to protest the New York Police Department policy called Stop and Frisk. It's actually called Stop, Question, and Frisk, but mostly it's Stop and Frisk. This is a policy that's gotten a lot of attention in the last few weeks, few months here in the city, because what's been uncovered is the unbelievably alarming, outrageous rate at which this is occurring. Last year in 2011, almost 700,000 mostly young, mostly Black and Latino, mostly men were stopped by the New York City Police Department. And in a rare number of those cases were they found to have any, arms or doing anything illegal or criminal or anything like that. They were just harassed by the police by this abusive policy. So the march on Sunday is part of a growing movement in this city to call on the mayor and the police commissioner not to do some cosmetic changes to the policy, but to get rid of this program called Stop and Frisk.
Well, what are the plans for the day? Obviously, a march is something that's very, very important. It gets physical feet on the ground. It gets press attention. What is it that you intend to accomplish with this march?
Well, as with many marches, there's more than one thing that we want to accomplish. Probably the single most important thing is to send a loud and clear message, even though this will be a silent march, and I'll get back to that in a second. But we want to send a very strong, clear message to the mayor and to the police commissioner that New Yorkers from all walks of life and every neighborhood of the city are opposed to this stop and frisk policy. We're actually going to be marching down 5th Avenue and passing the corner where the mayor's private mansion is, where his home is, on the Upper East Side of New York. That's what I mean by delivering a message to the mayor and, of course, to his police commissioner. So the plans for the day are, really very straightforward. We're hopefully, tens of thousands of people are going to show up. We believe that the numbers will be large, and we will be sending that message. The other thing that, of course, we hope to accomplish is to send a message first of all, to reinforce in the people who come to the march that being active on this issue can make a difference, and to send a message to all New Yorkers that they also can speak out and step out on this issue, take a stand, take a public stand do something to pressure the city's leadership to end the stop and frisk policy. So it's both about sending a message to the mayor, the police commissioner, the powers that be in the city, but also we're sending a message to all New Yorkers that this policy, in fact, not only can it change, it must change, but it will only change if we keep the pressure on City Hall.
Well, then I imagine that there's an importance for people to come out to this particular march as opposed to others. So what would make this one of singular importance, that if somebody were to march for the first time, why would they want to be there?
Right. I think that this one is important because of the timing of it. That is, it's just really in the last few weeks that that really there's been much more public attention to this outrageous policy of stop and frisk. Of course, many New Yorkers, those people who have been stopped and frisked by the police, have understood what's going on with this policy for quite some time now, for years. But the picture of what's going on all around the city has really just become much more public, much more in the public eye. So now is the time to take action, to not let the public's attention be diverted. Clearly, there are very many important things that are on people's minds, but we need to keep the public's attention and energy focused on this. We also think it's appropriate to do this on Father's Day. So many parents are so concerned what happens when their youngsters, high school age kids, people in their teens and young early 20s, what happens to them when they go out in the street? They're afraid of the real, they're just as afraid of the police as they are of criminals. So now is the time to take action to stop this policy. The other thing is that this is a very, very broad coalition. Upwards of 250 different organizations from all walks of life have come together. So this is an opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with people who you might not otherwise bump into, and to present a unified, to offer a unified message on this issue.
Well, both Stand Your Ground and Stop and Frisk seem to have their legitimacy based on the belief that somehow or another we citizens need protection from something so very dangerous that the police themselves are enrolled as a tool and as a backstop. So just what are we, quote, Americans, unquote, and I use that in quotes, being protected from?
Right. The rationale here in New York, I assume it's similar, maybe variation on the theme, in other cities, but the rationale here in New York is that this is a crime prevention measure. In fact, when you look at the statistics, for instance, in Los Angeles, crime has been brought down much more dramatically than it has here in New York City without a stop and frisk policy. They used to have a policy like this, and they cut that out. In fact, what this does is make community relations with the police department much more strained, much more tense, and therefore, of course, what you might call positive policing is undermined. No one is saying there aren't real safety issues that people have. Clearly, in any city, and wherever large numbers of people are living, there are concerns. But how do you address those concerns? Do you address them in a way that has a positive interaction with the community, or not? The other thing, of course, is that the implementation of this policy, whether by design or not, is completely racist. The vast majority of the people who are stopped, some 90% of the people who are stopped, are either Black or Latino young men. The city's population is not 90% young men who are Black and Latino. It's wildly disproportionate.
Well,
it's not only a bad policy, it also happens to be pretty racist, certainly in its implementation, if not in its design.
Well, it was amazing to me that Mayor Michael Bloomberg had the nerve to appear at an African-American church this last Sunday to defend stop and frisk. He went so far as to say that the law saved lives. Now, like you, when I look at the statistics, that out of hundreds of thousands of people stopped, almost 9 out of 10 of these being non-white, and of those, only a fraction of arrests or acquisitions of guns created, something like 0.003%. There's got to be a better use for police time.
Right. It's an outrageous policy. It's an abuse of police authority. And as I said, and I don't use these words lightly, but I think it is, again, whether by design or just by implementation, it is a racist policy, and it is an outrageous use of the police resources. And there are other examples of policing practices in other cities that seem to be more effective. So on top of everything else, it's not even very effective.
Well, this is what's so surprising. I think that the Bloomberg regime is the last vestige of law and order, the type of attempts to prove that a strong government can protect us from all kinds of evils, when actually the reverse is going to be more the case. Why aren't these police resources being diverted away from solving? Why are they being diverted away from solving homicides, rapes, and other violent crimes?
Right. I don't know. I don't know if they're being diverted away. New York City has a massive police department. It's I think 38,000 people. It's as large as some nations' armies are. They have a massive police department with massive amounts of equipment. They are on the streets constantly. There's a surveillance program. There's the way they approach and handle protest activities of all sorts, big and small, is outrageous. I mean, this problem of stop and frisk is part of a series of problems with the New York City Police Department. I'm not saying they aren't, putting resources into some other important tasks, like trying to solve murders and things like that. But I think we all know that whatever is going into those policing concerns, the goodwill that a police department must have with the communities that it serves is being completely undermined by this policy. It doesn't work. It's racist in its implementation. Like I said, because it doesn't work, there's really no need for it. It should be stopped, and it should be stopped now.
Well, as you may know, if you have any idea of the orientation of 15 Minutes of Fact, that our show is intended to educate people on the Occupy movement and every other movement that is standing shoulder to shoulder with it. So what is your take on the Occupy movement, and what role have occupiers taken in this issue?
Well, as many people in New York were completely, and I think all around the country, completely moved by the Occupy movement. I was not able to be, directly, intimately involved in the ins and outs of it all, but I was down at Zuccotti Park and Liberty Plaza, as much as I could last fall, and tried, went to many of the activities, many of the demonstrations. It was a very, very inspiring and powerful moment in the city and all around the country, for that matter. Of course, the police department, under the leadership of not the commissioner but the mayor, they didn't just close down that park. They brutally closed it down. There was, over and over again, in many instances, very rough behavior by the police, very rough treatment of the Occupy people at the park and on demonstrations. Hundreds of people were arrested on a march over the Brooklyn Bridge in a way where the police actually set up that risk, led people into a situation where they would be arrested, and on and on and on. So the Occupy movement has not, it has kind of gone in different directions. There's not one central location at this point. There are many different committees and working groups and task forces and projects that are all connected to Occupy. Many of those forces are actively involved in work around policing issues and are actively involved in helping to build this demonstration this coming Sunday, June 17th. So, there is that people, let me put it this way, people involved in all kinds of social change movements, economic justice, social justice, peace activism. People from all walks of life see the importance of this one and are coming together on Sunday.
Well, that is a beautiful summation of how important it is for people to come together, and the fact that no matter how new or how established a movement is, there's always a crying need for feet on the street and for people to get involved physically, not just from their armchair. I'm going to ask you to complete the show with an explanation as to why it's a silent march, and then I'm going to provide people with details so that once again they can get in touch with you and participate. So why is it a silent march?
Right. One of the things that I should have stressed at the beginning is that one thing that makes this march unique and special is that the people who took the initiative to get it organized, and that is Local 1199 of SCIU here in New York, the National Action Network led by Reverend Al Sharpton, and then NAACP, the National Association of Advancement of Colored People, took the initiative and put out a call for this demonstration. As I said, some 250 groups have already endorsed, and the numbers keep growing. But the decision was made early on to convene this as a silent march. That sometimes taking a silent stand, and in this case a silent march, can be an extremely powerful tool. We're not saying it's the only tactic that people should use. It's certainly there are many other ways for people to express themselves, but to have people from all walks of life express their commitment by being silent in this march, we believe can set up a powerful moment of reflection, of thought, sending a message of how serious this issue is and how serious that commitment to it is. The particular history is that in 1917, actually many, many years ago, the NAACP led a silent march down Fifth Avenue, pretty much on the same route that we're marching on, to call attention to the lynchings of African Americans, especially in the South, a massacre basically that had happened in East St. Louis, and other horrendous acts of racially motivated violence. So we're building on that history of the NAACP and using this tactic of a silent march, and we really hope and assume that everybody who comes will respect the organizers' decision to keep this as a silent march.
Well, Leslie, I can't thank you enough for spending some of your precious, and I do mean precious, time with us for this interview on 15 Minutes of Fact here on WGRNradio.com. I want to remind the listener that your feet on the street matter and count, and if you can't be there, find some way of making sure that your friends or neighbors are there. More information can be found at the website, silentmarchnyc.org. You can also locate Leslie on LinkedIn and on Facebook. You'll find her interview, along with dozens more, here at the WGRNradio.com website under 15 Minutes of Fact. And if you want to either throw some orchids or some onions, please write me at writtenoffusa@gmail.com and on Twitter as writtenoffusa. This is Jerry Ashton signing off, thanking again Leslie Kagan.